Well, welcome to the latest edition of TV on the Net. I'm your host, Tom Vartanian. Today's show brought to you by AmeriQ Credit Union, for every day, for everything. Located next to Little Caesars at 3944 Route 281 in Cortland. By Right Angle Creek Farm and Marathon. All natural, pasture-raised Angus beef from our farm to your table. By the Cortland Voice, the exclusive media partner of TV on the Net. For all your local news and sports in Cortland County at no cost to you, check out CortlandVoice.com. By the Royal Auto Group on Route 281 in Cortland, the home of no hassle, no razzle-dazzle. Check them out at RoyalAutoGroup.com. And by Yeaman Real Estate at the entrance to Yeaman Park off I-81, exit 11 in Cortland. Well, joining me today is a guy I met, almost 36 years ago now, back when I first started covering high school sports in 1985. He was a coach, and then he was a coach, then he became an AD, then he moved around as an AD. Lately, he was the Interstate Athletic Conference executive director, whatever you want to call him, the head man there. And now he's even taken one more step. We had Ben Nelson on back in the spring, and Ben was talking about retiring and everything. And so that was the question, who's going to be the new guy? And well, like I said, I met this guy 36 years ago, and I can't think of a better guy to become the new Section 4 executive director. Joining me today, Bill Bryant. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Tom.
Like I said, it's hard to believe. That was a long time ago. You were a football coach at Spencer Van Etten, and that's where we met. And it's been quite a ride for you since then.
It really has. I mean, I look at it as my journey in life of starting out as a young educator at Spencer Van Etten as both a teacher and a coach, and then, as you mentioned, in 1985, I became the athletic director there and went on to get my administrative degree. And when I completed that in May of '88, the Ithaca High School job opened up, and I applied and was selected to take over the athletic director's role in Ithaca. And I was there for 22 years, and I've done a lot of interim work after I retired from Ithaca. And then 4 years ago, the IAC, Bill Kwiatkowski was the executive director, and Mason Morenas was the treasurer. They were both retiring at the end of June in 2017. So I received a phone call wanting to know if I was interested in the position, and I was, and I was in that position almost 4 years until here. I stepped away at the end of April because I was asked to accept this position in early April. So I'm excited. My life has been great. I've had a great career. I wouldn't have chosen anything else to do in life other than to work with young people and hope that I could offer something to them that they could use later on in life. Because it all began for me in high school back in the 60s, which seems like a long time ago, but I had a high school coach that saw something good in me and gave me an opportunity that no other individual ever had done for me, and I've made the most of that opportunity. And I owe him a lot of credit, and also a lot of credit goes to Coach Butterfield, who I played for at Ithaca College. Those two gentlemen, besides my father, are the most influential people in my life that got me started on this path. So I'm looking forward to. I know that I'm in a tough position. Mr. Nelson is a tremendous individual. I've known him since he took over in '98 when I was at Ithaca. Over the years, he became a very good friend of mine, and along the way was a great mentor for me. And we reconnected up 4 years ago when I took over the IAC, and when he had mentioned that he was going to retire, I did sit down with him and have a discussion whether or not this was something that would be a good fit for me, and he believed it would be, and here we are today. And we're moving forward. So
Like you say, graduated, high school in the '60s. So were you a three-sport athlete back in the day?
yeah, football in the fall. In the wintertime, my first 2 years in high school, I was a wrestler. But then I grew a little bit and played basketball my senior year, but ran track for 4 years when I was in high school. Although I thought baseball was more of my sport at the time, I had an older brother who was a standout athlete who went to Penn State and played for Coach Paterno. And as a freshman back in '68, he started in the same backfield with Franco Harris and Lydell Mitchell on the freshman team at Penn State. So I've really been blessed with being surrounded with the people that have surrounded my life for so long, that have given me this great opportunity to continue the section in the path that Mr. Nelson certainly has had it in for many of years.
So where'd you go to high school? Where was it?
Owego Free Academy.
Owego.
And like I said, I had great coaches in high school, but one coach in particular that did see something good in me, and here I am. So,
like you said, after graduation, it led you to going to Ithaca College, and take it since you played for Coach Butterfield, meant you played a little bit of football for the Bombers back in the day.
yeah. Again, I think my story is a little bit unique. My mom passed away when I was 6. My older brother Tom was 3 years older than myself, and I had a sister that was 4 at the time, and that was back in the late '50s. And we were separated for a while after our mom passed away, and then we came back as a family. And my brother was the person that I looked up to growing up and idolized him, and he's a big reason why I'm sitting here at the table with you today also. But when I graduated, because my brother had gone to Penn State on a full ride scholarship, my dad didn't have money to send me to school, and I've always wanted to go to Ithaca College. So when I graduated in June of '70, I started working that summer, and in September I latched on to a job with the town of Owego Water and Sewer Department, and I worked there for 2 years. I worked there for 2 years and saved up money enough to go to school, and paid my way through college, and had the great opportunity to play for Coach Butterfield. And my junior and senior year, we played in the Alonzo Stagg Bowl, which was the national championship for Division III football. And again, I think that really kick-started the rest of my career as far as what I really wanted to do in life. And so it's been a great run, and I'm looking forward to this next chapter of my life right now.
So how did you find your way to like I said, I met you when you were at Spencer Van Etten. How'd you work your way there and start coaching at Spencer Van Etten?
I graduated in '76 from Ithaca College, and I student taught at Binghamton East Middle School, which was it was the feeder school to then North High School, back when Binghamton had 2 high schools. My roommate from college, Steve Deinhardt, was a North High grad, We roomed for 2 years. He was a year ahead of me because he had gone to Wyoming on a scholarship. But it was after his first year, he decided he wanted to come back closer to home. And so I student taught in the spring of '76 and happened to be at the right place at the right time. High school PE teacher had finished his administrative degree, stepped into an administrative role, so it opened up high school PE position, and I stepped into that. So I was there from '76 until January of '79. Again, being young and having a lot of energy and having big goals for myself. I knew I wasn't going to be able to achieve some of my goals staying in Binghamton. There just weren't the opportunities at that time. And this position at Spencer opened up, and I accepted the position, and I met, a lot, as you know, some great people at Spencer. And Jim Cronkite was there when I went there, and he was the baseball coach, and I taught a little bit with him, and Mr. Pakla was the athletic director at the time. And I went there in January of '79, and in the fall of '80, I became the head football coach, and was the head football coach through '87. And we had just come off a co-divisional title with we were tied for the division with Odessa Montour back in the early days of the original Section 4 football. Then they were called bowl games, but then I spent nearly 10 years there, and then in '88, when I completed my administrative degree and the Ithaca position opened up, I applied for that and got that, and ended up staying there to end my career after 22 years. But again, there's a lot of work out there for people like myself that want to continue to work and help programs, and that's what I did up until 4 years ago when I accepted the role as the executive director of the IEC. And I loved a great group of athletic directors. They were fun to be around. They had a passion for what they did, and that's what was important to me. Is I still have that fire and passion in me for athletics, and that was the attraction to one of the attractions to apply for Mr. Nelson's position as the executive director of Section 4.
I know back in those days, of course, everywhere you go, you find different schools have rivalry stuff, but there's got nothing like the Spencer-Candor rivalry as far as football. That was always the jug game, but of course, you went either direction a little bit from Spencer. You go to Odessa Montour, you had Roger Myers at the time, the football coach there. You had Bob Lee down at Watkins. Glenn. I mean, you had some good. There were some good coaches out there that you had to go head to head with your teams.
Yeah. No. I again, I just feel blessed that I kind of. I came on this scene at a perfect time for me as a young educator, as a young teacher, as a young coach. Roger Myers was very instrumental in helping me at an early age as an athletic administrator. And when Section 4 football started in the early '80s, Roger was the chairperson of Section 4 football, and he asked me to be his assistant. So I was his assistant chairperson for 20 years and enjoyed all of it. But yeah, there were some, Al Baker was at Candor because that was the big jug game. And he had Chuck Brady was at Elmira Heights, Coach Myers at Odessa, Jeff Ward was at Newark Valley. There, some really well-coached coaches that developed some really good programs not only in the IEC but within the section. And like now you look at Section 4 football, and you look at. In the day back when I coached against Tioga, it was against Coach Haggerty, and he was one of the, big kingpin coaches in football in the section back in the 70s and 80s, and he Tioga has had a great run. It seems like for the past probably 8 to 10 years. Nick Aiello, the young coach there, has done a great job of for the Class D football programs. And you look at the Class C's now, where Shenango Forks is a Class C school, and Coach Hogan's done a tremendous job. And I think back to the day when Jerry Taylor was the football coach there, and then Dick Russ came on, and then Kelsey Green came, and then Dave Hogan. It's just been a tremendous success right from the get-go back in the 80s to now. And but again, I think being in this role, it's to kind of go back to the football pieces, the leadership role that I play now, the skills that I learned and developed as a coach and as an administrator. There's a lot of. I've always been a firm believer that when you surround yourself with good people, good things happen. And there are a lot of great people that are in the section that are with great leadership skills that will continue to move in the path that we're in regards to Section 4 athletics.
And back then, in the mid-'80s, yeah, Candor had some real good, solid teams for years. You had a nice run. Of course, Newark Valley had a real good run over the years with Jeff Ward there. Wagon Glen made noise off and on during the season. Roger, Odessa Montour, always did have some good teams. I mean, it was funny. You could never, you'd always, it was fun as being a writer back then. You kind of, people say, well, who's the best team? And I said, it's depend who has the guns that year. Because I mean, every year, one of your schools, those schools there would step up in the large or small school division. It would change just because that's how good the talent was.
No, it did, and now sitting here in the Section 4 office, you'll remember this name, I'm sure, Wayne Amon from Candor. Without a doubt, he was the best as a football coach in Section 4 and the IAC at the time. Best athlete I ever coached against, and now he's the president of Section 4. And I guess it does come full circle. And I sat next to him at the Section 4 meeting last Wednesday, and I'm sitting there. We're having a great conversation, but I sit there looking at him thinking, man, he wasn't that nice on the football field 40 years ago, but he's a great man, and under his leadership now as the president for the next 2 years, we'll be in very good shape. So I'm looking forward to not only working with Wayne, but the executive board and the young lady outside the doors here. Janet is the administrative assistant, but she really is. I mean, I knew, because I've known Janet since '97, because she started a year before Mr. Nelson did. And so I worked with her for almost 13 years before I retired from Ithaca. And I always had contact with her. I always had phone conversations with her. I'd see her at the Section 4 office when I would go there for business. And now, accepting this role as the new executive director of Section 4, the first meeting I had with her, she just blew me away with her knowledge. She's a sponge. I mean, she really is. And a lot of times, as you know, our administrative assistants don't get enough credit because people don't don't see what they do. They maybe don't understand what their role is, but anyone that knows Janet in Section 4 knows that she's the piece, the part of the puzzle that keeps the wheel moving. And I'm excited to be able to work with her now, because she's been, just in the month or so that I've kind of been on the job, I mean, she's just been a tremendous asset to me. Any question I have, she's got an answer. She's amazing. So, yeah, I'm really blessed having that opportunity to work with her now. And we have a part-time treasurer, Mr. Koenig, and then Mike Andrews is like the assistant to me. And I've known Mike for many years. He was the soccer coach at Shenango Valley back when I was the AD at Ithaca, and then after he retired, he stayed involved with the soccer, both at the section and the state level. And then the last 4 years, I've been seeing him at our IAC meetings, because he and Mr. Nelson would come to the meetings and give out the Section 4 report. So, yeah, great surroundings here.
So in this case, you start with like in the smaller school area, the IEC, a lot of smaller schools. And like you said, you went to Ithaca 22 years. All of a sudden, it's back with Stack, Section 4 and Stack. But of course, then it's Ithaca. And of course, then they're playing the Binghamtons, the Vestals, UEs, over that. Different environment coaching a city school like Ithaca High School.
Yeah, no, and again, I think that's a part of me, or a part that I think has helped me, help me in this role as the new executive director. Is most of my career was at the large school, and I do have a large school mindset, but also the fact that I was at Spencer Van Etten for nearly 10 years, and then the past 4 years working in a small league, I had that perspective of a small school too. I mean, as an athletic director in Ithaca, it's so much different than the athletic directors that are in the IEC now. I was a 12-month full-time administrator in the IEC of the 19 schools. There's only a few of those athletic directors that are maybe 12 months. In fact, I think maybe there's only one that's 12 months. There's a couple that are 11 months. The rest of them are 10-month employees that are given a stipend, because maybe nobody else would take the position, but they've done a great job. And so, coming from a large school, I think I have a good understanding of Stack, having been there as long as I was in Ithaca. But also, I can have a perspective on the small schools too, because you wear so many hats. I know when I kind of first took over here, within the last month, I felt like I had a lot of balls in the air juggling. It was like a juggling act, and but to kind of get my feet underneath me, and I kind of reflected back when I was at Spencer Van Etten. I taught phys ed, I taught driver ed, I coached 3 sports. Then I became back then it was called the dean of students, and I still taught half a day, and that still exists in the IEC now. I mean, a lot of our athletic directors in that league still teach. If they don't teach a full load, they might get 1 or 2 periods off to do AD work, but they don't have any administrative assistant help. It's become a juggling act to them, and I think that's kind of where my career took a change. Was when I was at Spencer Van Etten, I worked for a high school principal who was the guidance counselor when I went there, and he convinced me to get my administrative degree, and then he became the principal. And while my last year working on my administrative degree, and he and I worked very well together. Paul Zoltowski, he he was going to create a position that, because he understood the importance of athletics and he understood the time commitment to it, that it was more than just a stipend position. And so he was going to present to the board the spring of '88 when I applied for the Ithaca job to have a vice principal / athletic director. And the board accepted it. But unfortunately for me, the night I went to Spencer Van Etten in July to clean out my office because I had accepted the position at Ithaca, the Board of Education approved that job that night, and that's when Jim Cronkite stepped into that role. But there was not going to be, I could have still coached, but I wouldn't have had to do any teaching. It would have strictly been 11-month at the time, 11-month administrative position. You would have a month off in the summertime, but it all, it happened so quick back then. But I do know that, Paul was instrumental in, getting me to get my administrative degree. But I think the fact that I was wearing 5 or 6 different hats was a decision that I wanted to be really a full-time athletic director someplace. But at the time, I certainly didn't expect it to go from a small C school back then at Spencer Van Etten to, at that time, Ithaca High School was the largest school in Section 4. That was quite a jump, but I survived it, and I worked with a lot of great people. I had the best booster club that anyone could ask to work for, because we didn't have a great budget in athletics in Ithaca. People, I think, have a perception that, Ithaca being the large school they are, they have a lot of money for athletics. So we had a lot of money in a school district budget, but from an athletic standpoint, in a $100 million budget, only 0.4% went towards athletics. So, we did the best we could with what we had, but like I said, I had a group of parents that ran the booster club, and they understood the needs of the athletic program at the time, and they were very supportive. So it was great.
Yeah, Ithaca's been one of those mysteries with football. Obviously you play with the Binghamton Vestos. Owego has its ups and good season, bad seasons. Vestal. Ithaca never really climbed that football hill. I mean, I remember Gary Scott being the coach. Ralph Becker was the coach there. I think Eddie Redmond tried to come in there from Lansing. He was an AD for a while too, but I think he tried to coach football after all the success at Lansing. He had tried to see if he could right the football ship. It's just, I don't know if it's just the environment, and like you said, it's a big school, so there's a lot more different personalities and everything. Just makeup of Ithaca per se as a city. Yeah. That for some reason the football team had back in the early days, back in the '60s and '70s, they had some good teams, but it's kind of been a slog ever since then. Really,
it really has, Tom. I wish I could put my finger on it, because it was, because football back at that time was a real passion for me, because I had the opportunity to play in high school and in college, and then to be a head coach for 8 years. When I went to Ithaca in '88, I think it was 84 when Coach Moresco retired, and Gary Scott came in, and he was there 85 and 86, and then Ralph came in '87, and I was hired in '88, and it was just, it was a struggle. We didn't have. We had a weight room, if that's what you wanted to call it, but it wasn't anything that was going to make our program better. And unfortunately, we were able to do some things in my time there, but then in 2006, when they were looking to do a capital project, I had presented to the Board of Education because it never went to vote until the 2008 year. And then they didn't start the work really on it until the year I retired. And but we put it, part of my plan was a strength and conditioning program. But it's been in there for over 10 years now, and it still hasn't had an impact. I might have maybe thought we would have gotten more out of having, I mean, the facility that they have at Ithaca High School is the finest facility in upstate New York, and it's better than most colleges. I mean, it's just an unbelievable facility. But we've had a large turnover of coaches over the years, and when that happens, you don't have that continuity of really being able to build a program. When I was back, because when I retired, Ed Redmond did come in and coach for 2 years, and he had success in the 2 years that he was there. I mean, I think he had something going, and but then in March of, I think it was 2012, I got a phone call to come back into the athletic office, and Ed had, it was March, but he had put his letter in of resignation in for that June. So one of the two big tasks at that time that were given to me by the superintendent was, we need a new head football coach and we need a new men's basketball coach. And I thought we had found somebody who, and I mean, we'll never know because he didn't accept the position, but he was from the Syracuse area. He was an assistant coach at Hamilton College. Had a strong background, and the district was even going to give his wife a position in the district. But when the package came out, it just financially, they couldn't leave the Syracuse area based on what we could offer them. So I was put in that position for the year, and that's a whole nother story. Anyways, Frank Fazio took over the program in '90. Frank did it for, I think, 7-8 years, and I thought Frank had the program headed in the right direction at the time, but for whatever reason, he stepped away from it. It seemed like it was a revolving door, and you're never going to be able to have the program that you hope for when you have that kind of a revolving door. So, the year that I did do it, Clarence Welch was my JV coach, and I'm happy that he's the new head coach. I wish him well. I hope that he can start to turn that program around, because it's, as you said earlier, I played against the good teams in the late 60s, in 68, 69, and then they were pretty tough up until, I think, 71, 72, but it really has. You're exactly right. It's been an uphill battle for so long, and of course, I think one of the things that hurts right now, and it has hurt us over the years, is not having a good youth program. I think, especially in a sport like football, you look at any of the good programs around this section, they all have established programs. We still don't have that in Ithaca, and I think that's hurt us.
So then, like you say, Bill Kwiatkowski stepped down, as the executive director. What led to you coming in and taking over the IAC for the past few years up till your move now to
I got a call from one of the ADs in the IC. That was a friend of mine, and said, what are you doing? And I was doing some interim work in Marcellus. I was working with the health and PE teachers there. And my connection to get there was Judy Pastel, who was my superintendent at Ithaca, was the interim superintendent. And she'd called me back in the spring of 15 and wanted to know if I could help her out with the health and PE, because they needed a director, because that is still a state mandate that you have a director of PE. And so I went up there, and they hired a new superintendent that July, and she liked me, and she wanted me to stay on, so I stayed on, and I did that right up until March of this year. It was a per diem position, but I'd go up at least once a week, sometimes a couple times a week, because I was observing the phys ed and health staff. We redid the phys ed curriculum. The PE curriculum, we redid that the first year I was there. But yeah, it was at Christmas time. In fact, it was right after Christmas. I think it was maybe the 27th of December. I got a call from a friend saying, Bill, what are you doing? And I said, right, nice. I'm working at Marcellus, but I'm kind of in between other work. I said, what's up? And he said, would you be interested in being the executive director of the IEC? I said, yeah, I would. So I had to get I had to have a cover letter and a resume to Will Cook, who at the time was the vice president, but was the athletic director at Tioga, and by the 30th. So I put my resume and cover letter together. I drove it down I called him. It was snowing that day. I called Will and drove to Tioga and dropped off my resume and cover letter, and got a phone call after the new year for an interview. Interviewed, and it was like the tail end of January. They called and offered me the position, and it got approved at the February IAC meeting. And so I started attending the meetings in February all the way to June, but I didn't officially take over to July 1st. But I've really enjoyed the 4 years working with the group of athletic directors. Setting the agendas and getting the minutes back out and doing the scheduling, and we've had a little bit of realignment in a couple different sports in the 4 years I've been there. But I've been, not only the athletic directors, but I've really enjoyed working with the coaches and the sport coordinators. They've just been a great group to work with, and it was, not knowing whether or not I would get this position leading up to it. I was thinking, am I doing the right thing? Because it would be tough to walk, even though I'd only been with the IC for 4 years. I got to know them, and they got to know me really well, and we had a great time together. And it was a tough decision just to step away from it. So,
well, the hardest part, whether it's the Mid-State Athletic Conference now, what it's called down here, in Sydney, or whether it's the IAC or the Tri-Valley League, even though they don't have as many, they don't have football, some of the sports
right.
that you have to deal with. It is funny, you have league. Some teams are strictly, it's league schedule, and then you go to sectionals and stuff like that. Other sports like field hockey, football, the section lacrosse, the section kind of coordinates it. So, what's the balancing act there between the section is in charge of some of the sports, whereas the leagues actually are in charge of some of their sports.
I was involved with the Section 4 football when it started back in the early 80s. I think it's worked very well over the years because with football, as you mentioned, field hockey and men's and women's lacrosse, I was never involved with the field hockey end of it, even though we had field hockey at Spencer Van Etten at the time, but it wasn't Section 4 field hockey. That didn't take place until after I left Spencer Van Etten. And then going to Ithaca, Ithaca having lacrosse, and then we were the first school in Section 4 to have women's lacrosse. And that has taken off over the years. But with the committees that have been formed when they became section-wide sports, I can certainly speak to the football and the lacrosse because I've been involved with them for over 20 years. We have great chair people that chair those committees, and the people that are representatives of of each of the divisions have been very good at what they do, and that's the one thing with this role as the new Section 4 person is doing all the schedules for the IAC except for those 3 sports. I won't even be involved with the scheduling here because there's someone that does the scheduling for football, and there's a committee that does it for field hockey, and there's a group that does it for lacrosse. So I'll oversee that, but I don't think that there's a lot of difference. Somebody asked me the other day, do you see more sports going to a section-wide thing? And I hadn't really thought about it, but I don't think so. I don't know if there's ever been any talk about that. The football, I think, that came about at a financially desperate time. Superintendents, the travel that was going on, we needed to cut back, and so that's kind of, I believe, how Section 4 football really originated, because it was geographically set up where, Spencer Van Etten didn't have to travel to Unitigo, or Unitigo didn't have to travel to an Elmira Heights, except maybe when you got to the bowl, back then the bowl games, and so yeah, I don't see anything down the road that would lead me to believe that we would be looking at any other sports from a sectional level. But I think that if you look at those 3 sports of how we've done, field hockey we have as good as field hockey as any section in the state of New York. There's some years all 3 state titles are won by Section 4. Lacrosse, the same thing. We've had. I was fortunate to be at Ithaca at a good time when they had a great run of lacrosse, but it was either Corning or Ithaca on a year-in basis for the Class A's. You've got Vestal and UE, those schools in the B's, and Shenango Forks has really come on in all of their sports, not just football. They're in both men's and women's sports. Shenango Valley winning the class title this year in boys lacrosse, and in football. I think year in and year out, Section 4 is well represented at the regional level and certainly at the state championships. So I think the section-wide sports has been huge for us as a section, but again, I don't see anything happening in the future that I'm aware of.
The biggest change is football. Back when you played, the alignments were different, and of course, back when I played, we didn't worry about even I was at Afton. We didn't worry about the Waltons and all those schools because they were a class higher, and they were strong in that class. But it's funny now. You look, all these powers that were Class B powers over the years, or Class C powers over the year. they're all now considered small schools, just with the way the state's bed numbers have changed, and
Yep.
I don't know. Part of it, everybody said Section 4, everything is football driven. Well, they say it here, and they say it in Section 3 too, is driven by the big schools because they're trying to find opponents, just because there aren't that many bigger schools. But it's still, this baffles me. You see Walton, Delhi, Bainbridge had a nice run. They were combined with Africa for a while.
Yep.
And there's more and more combined schools in high school football even now than a lot of sports. But so many of them are now considered small schools, so you've got this huge clump of them, in Class D, and there's still not as many in the upper levels. And it's the same thing with field hockey. Before, Marathon used to have its little group, and Spencer,
Right.
I think, was in there. And,
Yep.
you had Vestal was up here, Main End was up in their own little group, and Whitney Point and Green were up in their own little group. Now they're all together. Sometimes these smaller class tournaments are almost a state championship in their own right, because the competition is there now.
Yeah, no, great point, Tom. Yeah, you're exactly right. The classification numbers have changed over the years, and that's kind of how Shenango Forks being a B school and Sus Valley being a B school a few years back, when they redid the numbers, that they've dropped to a C. Now in those schools, their numbers from an athletic standpoint, they still probably are keep maintaining 35 to 40 kids at the varsity level, whereas a lot of the small, Class C's and D schools, that's why some schools have had to go to 8-man footballs. They can't get 16 kids out for football, but they can get 12 kids out to play 8-man football. And there is, I'm going to be attending my first, well, really my second. Mr. Nelson took me to the May spring executive committee meeting of New York State Public High School back in May. And Mr. Nelson's been on an ad hoc committee for classification. And there's going to be a lot of discussion at the July summer meeting. And in fact, I think they want to take a vote, but I know that there's a section that's asked to have it tabled. But that is possibly looking at increasing the number of classes that we have, and based on sport. So if you have 600 schools that play basketball, then have 7 classes, have a AA, an A, however they want to letter them or number them, like other states do. So that, and again, the basis of that is to give schools more of an opportunity to vie for a state title. I'll just use 5 classes as an example. So the AAs, let's say there's 600 schools that play basketball. Well, there's more than that, but let's say 600. The top 75 schools would be AAs. The bottom class of D would be 100. So you take 100, you got 175 schools there. Well, then take those other 3 classes and divide those numbers that's left. That might come out to maybe 120. Whereas now some of the classes are 150 to 175 schools in a class. What they're looking at doing is to give more schools, by increasing another class, is to give schools an opportunity to have a chance to play it in a state tournament. So I'm still learning some more about that, because that's something I hadn't been involved in until I took over this role. But Mr. Nelson's been very helpful in getting me up to speed with that. So it'll be interesting here next month when we go to the summer meeting, the discussion that's going to happen, because I think it'll be a pretty intense discussion on that.
And I know I read, I can't, right off the top of my head, I can't think which school it is football is this outlier now. How popular 8-man has become. The numbers, just enrollment for playing football is, school enrollments are down, so the numbers are down for football. A lot of teams have dropped JV programs just so they can field a varsity program even, and just modified in varsity now. But I know there's a 10th school this year, I know in Section 4 that's looking to play 8-man. But I look at the 8-man, some of the teams out there now that are 8-man football. You've got Lansing, you've got
you got Spencerville and Candor.
They're now in
They just last week they dropped down, and so we have 12 teams in 8-man football now. So which leaves us only 28 in 11-man, and not all the divisions are equal. So there are going to be divisions that are going to end up with buys, and given the time frame that we're in right now, being able to fill those buys to help those schools out. So we've got a lot of work to with that between now and August. You brought up a good point. I want to talk a little bit about, if I could, is the participation level. I didn't realize, being involved with the IAC. I mean, I remember when I was the AD at Ithaca, every year we would fill out a participation survey for New York State Public High School. Well, back then I used to get the survey, the results back, so I could look to see where our numbers were and what have you. The last 4 years being with the IAC, I had never had access to that information, and it wasn't until I applied for this position that I realized that participation level, not just here in Section 4, but around the state of New York, has really dropped the last 3 to 5 years. So one of my first initiatives or goals right out of the gate here with Section 4 is we've put together we're going to put together a 5-year strategic plan. And so I have 3 individuals that have said that they will chair each of one of the 3 committees, and we're going to have 1 rep from every league. So total there would be 6 people on each committee, so there would be 18 people. And the 3 areas that we're going to look at, one is finance. Let's see where we should be in 5 years. The second area is a handbook. And the third area, which I think is the big one, is participation. What can we do as a section and as schools with getting our numbers back? I know COVID has had an impact in the past year, but the numbers have been dropping before COVID. So there obviously was a trend there. We've got to look at some ways of how we can increase our numbers, and I think everybody around the state feels the same way, that we need to get back to where our numbers were. So that's for me. That's a huge thing that I'm looking forward to working on with a number of people. Is what we can do as a section in regards to participation. I remember, again, when I was first hired in Ithaca, that was in my final interview with the superintendent. He wanted more students involved in sports, and that was in '88. We had 700. I should know the number, but it was like 730 something students at Ithaca that were involved in sports in '88. 1990, we had 1,400 kids. Nearly doubled. Wasn't because of me. As I mentioned earlier, I believe good things happen when you surround yourself with good people. And I was able to surround myself with good people at Ithaca in the early days. And that's what helped all of our programs at Ithaca. And so, I'm looking at, some of the strategies that we use there to recruit kids, of how our schools can recruit kids to be able to get more kids back out participating. So keep my fingers crossed and hope that we're hoping to complete. Each committee is going to meet this fall, and then they'll meet again in the winter time, and then we'll present to the executive board in early spring, and it'll be a 5-year plan starting with the 22-23 school year. Because I think it's going to, I want to make sure that it's done right. So we're going to take the whole year to put everything together. And then my hope is when we get to the 4th year of the 5-year plan, is to start looking to another 5-year plan. So when the first 5-year plan ends, we'll have another 5-year plan to go right into. So.
And of course, everybody's got to be a little more excited now to the fact that pretty much all the restrictions are being lifted. That maybe
Yep.
we're going to get back to as close as a normal high school season starting this fall, which means everybody can go see games now more. Yep. And there still might be some schools I think there still might be some more policies you see here and there
Sure.
to work things out. But it looks like things might be almost a little bit more normal again starting in the fall.
Yeah, I hope so, Tom. Be honest with you, a few weeks ago, I was just hoping to be back to some type of normalcy by August 23rd. But after last week, when the governor lifted those restrictions, I think we will be back to some normalcy. But you hit it on the head. Every district's going to be different. I mean, there are still going to be districts out there that may still put a limit on what the capacity can be for an outdoor sport or even an indoor sport like volleyball in the fall season. I saw something in the paper yesterday that the Bills are 100% capacity for the fall. So again, I think from where I'm sitting right now, I just have to kind of sit and wait, see what happens here in the next 5 or 6 weeks before we start the fall season, and meet with people. And Mr. Nelson started a superintendent's advisory committee this past spring, and Dr. Knowles from Waverly, the superintendent there, he is the chair of the committee, and there's one superintendent from each of the 5 leagues. And they've already met a couple different times, and that'll be a good group. I'm looking forward to working with them and hope that we can all be on the same page, because superintendents are they have a district to run, and they've got they have their clientele that they have to deal with and work with their boards. And so there may be some schools that do keep some restrictions, and maybe not. But yeah, it's we're going to be in a different, as you know, we'll be in a different position this fall than we were even with the fall 2 season that started back in March. So.
Well, Bill, I wish you best of luck in this position. Hopefully we don't go through. I was with Ben the day before they started pulling the plug. I was down at Windsor for a marathon basketball game the day before, and he said we got an executive directors meeting tomorrow, a teleconference, and right then you kind of knew something was happening. And
Yeah.
of course then that went down, and of course then I spoke to Robert Zayas a couple times, and he really didn't. He's been through out in New Mexico, I think it was, where he was once. So it's something he had been through and didn't want to see it go through it again, but just had to do it. And of course, with Ben and everybody, it became the new norm this year. And so, like we said, hopefully everything will be back to normal. And we wish you the best of luck in this job down here.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you taking the time to come down and talk with me. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you. So thank you.
And that'll do it for this edition of TV on the Net. Today's show brought to you by AmeriQ Credit Union, for every day, for everything. Located next to Little Caesars at 3944 Route 281 in Cortland. By Right Angle Creek Farm and Marathon. All natural, pasture-raised Angus beef from our farm to your table. By the Cortland Voice, the exclusive media partner of TV on the Net. For all your local news and sports in Cortland County at no cost to you, check out CortlandVoice.com. By the Royal Auto Group on Route 281 in Cortland, the home of no hassle, no razzle-dazzle. Check them out at RoyalAutoGroup.com. And by Yeaman Real Estate at the entrance to Yeaman Park off I-81 Exit 11 in Cortland. So for my guest Bill Bryant and yours truly, Tom Vartanian, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.